Welcome to this latest Balanced Wealth Planning webinar, Making the Most of Your Retirement. I'm Tina Winter, a Chartered Financial Planner and Registered Life Planner at Balanced Wealth. Most of this will be me speaking live, but first there's a short introductory video I recorded earlier. I'll be taking questions at the end of the presentation, and you'll find a Q&A box to the left of your screen if you want to add your questions as you think of them. All of the participants will be muted during the presentation, but you'll be unmuted at the end. Welcome to Balanced Wealth Planning. I'm Tina Winter, a Chartered Financial Planner and Registered Life Planner, and this is the latest in our series of webinars and the third one that I've presented on the topic of retirement. Most of the session will be me spouting on live, but first a short pre-recorded introduction. There'll be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the session. Across the three webinars, I've moved forward through time. We've covered planning for retirement and the main means of funding retirement. This time I've aimed the content toward those retiring now or already retired, which is the type of client that I specialise in. First, some words about the last year or so. The first national lockdown started on March 23rd last year. Looking back at my diary, the last face-to-face meeting that I had was on March the 11th. I remember vividly that I was due to meet with a client aged 80 in his home on March the 12th and decided that I really shouldn't go with the news that was coming out of China and mainland Europe. And every meeting since then has been a video meeting from the comfort of my spare bedroom. So much that has happened has affected people in a range of different ways, emotionally, physically and mentally, as well as financially. For some people, the impact of the COVID crisis has been devastating financially. For others, fortunate enough to have been able to transition into work easily, less so. We've seen something of a trend towards early retirement during the pandemic, particularly business owners who've decided to bring forward the retirement plans, or those made redundant at 55 plus who've decided against the hassle of trying to find another job. So with this background, how can you still make the most of retirement? So first, a few thoughts about retirement. In retirement, you need enough purpose to leap out of bed in the morning and enough money to sleep well at night. This is a quote that I came across recently on social media. Alan Smith is a financial planner who works in the same sort of space as we do, and I very much agree with his sentiment here. Second thought, the three stages of retirement are the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. This was something a client said to one of my colleagues recently, but when I researched it, because I liked it, I found out that it's a saying from a book written by a US financial planner on the three stages of post-career life. And congratulations on quitting your job without being escorted out of the building by our old friend Anonymous. The third one's from a retirement greetings card. I like that. So this is our agenda for today. When I asked what does retirement mean for you, the important word there is you, not retirement. Everyone's different, but there are some common themes. It would be remiss of me to act as if the last 12 months or so haven't happened, so I'll spend some time looking at what effect they've had on people's plans. Then I'll move on to actual retirement itself and some key issues there, ending with some thoughts and actions to take away. So what does retirement mean for you? For quite a lot of retirement people, it centres around their grandchildren, if they have them, like in the picture here. So you've retired or retiring shortly. Congratulations. It's a condition a lot of people aspire to. But are you doing it to get away from something, the daily grind, or are you heading into something different? Hopefully a new phase of life, the third age. People are motivated by pain or pleasure, either reducing pain or increasing pleasure. What I would say is welcome to the rest of your life. Remember the saying earlier, the early stages of retirement were termed the go-go years. Perhaps time to be doing those things you dreamed of during your time at work. Unfortunate if those things involve travel, certainly in the last 12 months or so, then that's not going to have been possible.
First of all, do you really want to give up working? This is from a paper from the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries. Overall, the beneficial effects of work outweigh the risks of work and are greater than the harmful effects of long-term unemployment or prolonged sickness absence. Work is generally good for health and well-being. During the COVID crisis, a lot of people have had their working lives affected. Furlough, redundancy, working from home, trying to work whilst homeschooling, not to mention key workers having to work harder than they've ever done before. I've seen a divergence of views. I'm personally of the view that work is good for you, but that's as long as you love your work or there's something that you really want to do. I have had clients come in to see me to say that they hate their job and can't wait to get away, but that's fairly rare in my experience. And it doesn't mean that they hate everything about work. It can bring companionship, status, a reason to get out of bed in the morning, and of course, money. So academic researchers identified 5 common themes in the transition to retirement, which I've listed on this slide. For most people, retirement is characterized by continuing to work in some way, a bit of gradual disengagement from their current role, or new opportunities for paid or unpaid work. Let's call that the gradual descent into retirement. For some, it's experienced as a one-off event followed by complete detachment from the world of work, what I'd probably call jump off the cliff retirement. That's all right if you've got a parachute. This study was of academics working in higher education and was carried out over a number of years. In a lot of cases with academics, their subject is their passion, and they can't just suddenly exit from it and have no wish to. An interesting takeaway from this research is that very few people entering the retirement stage of life consider themselves old. Old is always older than you, as long as there are people who are older than you. So how has the COVID crisis affected retirement plans? Well, one thing it's made us do is all get used to wearing masks, like the gentleman picture here. So the insurance company LV carried out some research recently to see what trends there were in retirement since the beginning of the COVID crisis. And this is a summary of their findings. Significant numbers of over 55s have left full-time work, particularly women aged over 65. A high proportion of those who have retired earlier than previously planned. Until 2019, there was an increasing number of over 65s in the workforce, and that trend has now reversed. Some older people haven't fully retired yet, but particularly following redundancy or earnings reducing, many have accessed their pension savings earlier than they originally intended. And this is against a background of increasing state pension age. It's currently 66. It's rising to 67 for people under 60 now. And it's already been announced it'll increase to 68 for people less than about 43 now. So some figures. How much is enough to retire on? There was a very useful report issued in 2019 in which researchers from Loughborough University actually looked across a large sample of people living in the UK and what they were actually spending their money on at different income levels in retirement. It assumes that people aren't dipping into their retirement pot before they reach state pension age, which, as I previously mentioned, is increasing over the next few years to age 68. I took this table from the Financial Times, but you maybe want to spot the deliberate error there, or possibly not so deliberate error. There's an extra 0 on the figure for the pension fund size required to top up state pension level to the required minimum income level for a single person in retirement. A fund in the region of 18,000 makes more sense than 180,000. So for a comfortable retirement, which I think most people would aspire to, I'll define on the next slide. This is talking about a fund size in the region of 600,000 for a single person, or a combined fund size of 717,000 for a couple on retirement at the age that state pension becomes payable. That's assuming that all pension provision is defined contribution and that an annuity is bought at retirement age. Not so common now, but at least gives an idea of the sort of funding required for a rock-solid guaranteed income for different levels of living standards. So how do they define a comfortable retirement? Well, financial freedom and some luxuries, £56 per person per week food shop, a 2-year-old car replaced every 5 years, 3 weeks holiday in Europe each year, probably not last year, £1,500 for clothes and footwear each year, kitchens and bathrooms replaced every 10 to 15 years, £50 for each relevant birthday present. It also assumes no mortgage or rent. And that's not the fortunate position that everyone is in on reaching retirement age nowadays. Obviously, not everyone can or wants to wait until state retirement age to retire. This is an example from LV again that gives an indication of what sort of difference retiring from work at age 60 instead of age 65 could make. The specimen pension income of £18,700 per annum gross from age 65 reduces to £13,200 from age 60, a 30% reduction because of those 5 years. The key factors there are that contributions to pension funding stop 5 years earlier, and the pension income is drawn for 5 years longer, so a double whammy. But how much do people actually spend in retirement? We've seen a slide with the PLSA research, which was assuming constant income needs through retirement. But is that actually the case? This graph comes from research commissioned by Prudential a few years ago and looks at 5 different demographic groups. I'll put a link to the report towards the end of the presentation, which makes interesting reading and defines the different demographic categories. It shows that in all cases, expenditure starts to reduce after the mid to late 60s, and by age 80, some groups have reduced their expenditure quite considerably. In the terminology of my earlier slides, perhaps 60 to 70 are the go-go years, 70 to 80 the go-slow years, and 80 plus the no-go years. This doesn't, of course, factor in potential care costs in later life. So the characteristics of the different group, the top line, yellow, is called extravagant couples. And extravagant couples spend more than 40% of their income on leisure. The next line down in blue, transport lovers, presumably spend more than most on their cars and other modes of transport, and there are more of them in the East Midlands than anywhere else in the UK. Interesting. And frugal foodies, the red dotted line at the bottom, spend 27.5% of their budget on food and drink. Probably not spending unduly on travel or transport. So planning for a secure future. How do you go about planning for a secure future? I'm going to talk about both using the services of a financial planner and the DIY route where you navigate retirement on your own. If you decide that you'd like to work with a financial planner in the run-up to your retirement, then what can they add? Most of these aren't even finance related. I did try and come up with an acronym here, but I couldn't quite make it. COTCEC is not exactly memorable. But what I would say where we can help is to clarify your goals and objectives. We can help with focusing on what you really want to do with the rest of your life. We can provide objectivity. We can help you see the wood for the trees. It can be time saving. You may well be an expert plumber or tree surgeon, so concentrate on your skills and outsource your financial planning to someone who's an expert at that. Cost saving. When it comes to investment, it's been shown that using a planner can save overall costs and also increase investment returns. Technical knowledge. You don't know what you don't know, particularly the vagaries of pension legislation. Cash flow planning, which we always use when we're planning for clients. You could do this yourself, and I've seen some fantastic Excel spreadsheets from clients, but only financial planners have access to the sophisticated tools that incorporate every possible eventuality. And we can also keep you on track with annual reviews. A financial plan isn't set it and forget it, especially when it comes to income drawdown, which I'm going to mention later when I come to retirement income. Just to focus on the first point from our previous slide, clarifying goals and objectives. I mentioned that I'm a registered life planner. I've gone through the full training from the Kinder Institute. My financial planner colleagues at Balance Wealth have also undergone life planning training. There's a process to this known as EVOKE, which is a much better acronym, which is what we follow with clients. So E is for exploration, the getting to know you phase with open-ended questions and wide open exploration. B is for vision, where your goals are clarified. O is for obstacles, the phase where you take on all the challenges and obstacles to your dream life and resolve them methodically. K is for knowledge, when the technical knowledge comes in. And E is for execution, where the plan is put into action. And George Kinder has written a book designed for the public rather than life planners called Life Planning for You. And there's a website where you can actually, to a certain extent, work through this process yourself. So if you are doing it yourself, what if you don't want to hire a financial planner to guide you with a bespoke plan, but you feel confident to navigate your retirement yourself? Then I would recommend the following steps. Really spend some time working through what you'd like your retirement to look like. It's not just an absence of work, it's a new phase of life. I've already mentioned Life Planning for You by George Kinder. That could certainly help you with clarifying what you do want your life to be like. Get a handle on your overall financial situation, not just assets and income, but also spending and debt. Don't forget to allow for having some fun. And don't forget inflation and the possibility of longevity or potentially care costs. There's a lot of information and tools out there to help you. And as I'll run through later, pension providers, particularly that deal directly with the public and not via a financial advisor, are evolving more and more DIY solutions to provide you with guidance on the transition into retirement. So where might your income in retirement be coming from? There are three main pillars to retirement provision, and the first and most universal is state pension. People reaching state pension age since April 2016 are beneficiaries of the single-tier pension, which is for most people a higher amount than those retiring earlier receive. So the full single-tier state pension from April 2021 is going to be £179.60 per week, which is £9,339 per year, not an insignificant amount. State pension age is 66 now, increasing to 67 and 68 later. It rises annually in line with the so-called triple lock, which is the highest of inflation, average earnings, and 2.5%. It's often rumoured that that's going to stop, so it's still in place for 2021, but for how much longer will that go on? You need to have 35 years worth of national insurance contributions to receive the full amount. The amount you receive may be affected by being contracted out in earlier years. And I always recommend that you should check your entitlement on the gov.uk website and make up missing years if there are gaps. It's good value to do so. So defined benefit schemes. I'm not going to go into many technical details about the main types of pension scheme here, but I've set out a few of the main features on this in the next slide. Defined benefit pensions, be they the old style final salary model or the more frequently seen nowadays career average model, are the gold standard of pension provision. Most life schemes are nowadays seen in the public sector, for example, the NHS, police, civil service and teachers, or in the quasi-public sector, such as the University Superannuation Scheme, or USS. I've got quite a number of academics among my client base, and the USS must really be one of the most complex schemes around. The main point to take on board here is that what the scheme does is promise you, as the scheme member, a retirement income for your life, and in most cases for your dependents if you predecease them. Basically, you and your employer put aside money from your pay during your working life so that you can continue to be paid once you've retired from work. Hence my description on the top slide there, deferred remuneration. It doesn't promise you a lump sum of money that you can do with as you decide. The money supporting the pensions belongs to the scheme trustees. I'm not going to consider the thorny question of transfers away from defined benefit schemes, as it's outside the scope of this webinar. Needless to say, if after a very stringent advice process, you are recommended to transfer and you do transfer away from a defined benefit scheme, you will transfer into the realm of defined contribution schemes, which I'll cover on my next slide. My final line on that slide, the major benefit of defined benefit schemes is the security of income, which will normally be index linked for life. So defined contribution schemes, which could be workplace pensions, stakeholder pensions, personal pensions or occupational money purchase schemes, basically all have similar characteristics. And members of these sort of schemes could be employed, self-employed, or even to a limited extent, unemployed, even children. Unlike defined benefit schemes, the only link to the amount you are paid by your employer is that a percentage of your earnings will be paid into the scheme, probably both by you and your employer. There's no direct link between the amount that you earn and the level of the resulting pension. There are lots of variables that will determine that, including what you choose to invest in within the pension wrapper. Most schemes will offer default investment solutions or pathways while you're building up benefits. For example, there'd be a growth phase, say up to 10 years before your planned retirement date, when the underlying investments will be higher risk. And then a pre-retirement phase, say in the 10 years before your planned retirement, where over that period, the risk of the underlying investments is reduced gradually. You can also select your own underlying investments in your pension scheme, either yourself or with the aid of an advisor if you have one. If we're advising, we'll be taking into account a number of factors, including your attitude to investment risk, the length of time until your planned retirement, the underlying costs of the investments, and also ensuring that there was diversification across a variety of asset classes. So with a defined contribution scheme, the major benefit, I would say here, is a lot of flexibility when drawing benefits. And later on in this webinar, I'll be talking about how you might draw benefits from defined contribution schemes. So, what this lady is pondering is where her income in retirement is likely to be coming from. We'll take state pension as a given here and look at the other possible sources. So when you come to take benefits from a defined benefit scheme, at retirement, part of the pension can be commuted for a tax-free lump sum, where you basically give up part of your pension in exchange for a lump sum. With some schemes, the lump sum is automatic. For example, definition of some schemes is, for example, 1/80th of final salary times years of service as pension, plus 3/80ths of final salary times years of service as a lump sum. The pension will be payable for the life of the scheme member, however long it is. The pension is likely to be inflation-proofed with either CPI or RPI, and the increase amount will be governed by the scheme rules. It's likely to include spouses and dependents' pensions if you predecease them. It's likely to include guarantees if death occurs shortly after starting to take benefits. And there'll be an early retirement reduction if benefits are started before the scheme normal retirement date, because the pension is going to be paid for that many years longer. So the good thing here is that the pension will continue for the rest of your life, however long it is, and for a certain extent for the rest of your partner's life if you predecease them. I would stress here that what people spend is income, and certainly at older ages, say 80 plus, I've seen the comfort that the security of a regular index-linked guarantee can bring. What seemed important at 60 might not be so important at age 80, and vice versa. You have different priorities. Defined contribution schemes are a different animal altogether. While they lack in certainty, they provide a huge amount of flexibility as to how money can be drawn out. So from age 55 onwards, currently, increasing to age 57 at some time, you can take up to 25% of your pension pot as tax-free cash. The remainder of the fund can continue to be invested and used to provide you an income, and that income will be taxable. Historically, annuity purchase, i.e. handing over funds to an insurance company and they then paying you an income for life, was the only option, and that is still available. But flexible drawdown is the biggie, which is now possible, where you can take regular payments or ad hoc payments of any amount up to the value of the fund as and when you choose. Cash flow planning, which we carry out for all clients as a matter of course, can be really helpful to simulate what's going to be possible, how much income that's going to be feasible to draw without reducing the scheme too much in the early years. And remember the slides from earlier, the go-go, slow-go and no-go years. It's quite likely that you're going to want more income in the earlier years than you're going to want in the later years, although that's not always the case. But what it means is you can do the things that you want to do, but it's very important that you don't let the money run out before you do. With the flexibility that defined contribution schemes provide comes the need to make decisions effectively every year for the rest of your life. As mentioned, you don't want your pension fund to run out before you do, but similarly, you don't want to be so cautious that you don't live the life you want to lead. The annuity purchase option isn't only for the start of retirement. Later on in life, it may be well worth considering it again when your priorities have changed. There's also the option of temporary annuities that last for a set time frame rather than for life. For example, could be set up until such a time as state pension comes in or a defined benefit pension kicks in. Pensions aren't the only thing that can provide you with income in retirement. What will you live on in retirement? The ideal situation, I would say, is that you have sufficient guaranteed index-linked annual income to cover your basic needs for the rest of your and your partner's lifetime. By guaranteed, what I mean is state pension, a defined benefit pension, or annuity possibly. And then flexible income above that to fund your discretionary spending, which might be holidays, just generally having a good time. And that could come from defined contribution pension funds by drawdown. It could come by tax-free withdrawals from ISAs. It could come from other investments. GIA is a general investment account, so just unwrapped investments or investment bonds. It could come from rental income from an investment property. It could come from ongoing earnings, or it could come from downsizing, or what we sometimes call right-sizing your property. On the question of downsizing, I found that clients will often say that is what they plan to do, but in reality, they rarely do, or at least not to the extent where they release a sizable amount of capital. Nationwide Building Society commissioned some research recently and found that in the UK, 40% of over 55s live in 4-bedroomed houses. During COVID, people have realised that having a reasonably sized living space and some outdoor space has been vital. Where you live and what your home is like is much more about emotion than logic. Often older people will hang on in there until there's a crisis and they're forced to make a decision. So how might we as financial planners look to invest funds, probably in a personal pension, to provide income in drawdown, but could be in other wrappers, for example, in retirement? you involved in retirement, there is a new sort of risk that you won't have actually come across before, which is what we call sequencing risk. Once you're starting to withdraw money from your investments, taking a withdrawal from a fund that's falling in value can have a real detrimental impact. So how do we look to mitigate that risk? It's what we like to call, not very flatteringly, a bucket strategy, and I've got 3 buckets here. So let's say we have 3 years worth of your income in the lowest risk bucket, which might be cash or near cash investments, 5 years income in a medium risk bucket, so slightly higher risk investments, and then the remainder of funds, the long-term funds, in the highest risk bucket. And then we'd review every year, because the first bucket, the 3-year lowest risk bucket, is going to empty over 3 years and will need refilling. Now, as financial planners, we tend to see the more affluent end of the retirement demographic. But plenty of people, well more than 50%, actually don't feel the need or don't feel they can afford to take financial advice in retirement. So the FCA have recently announced that investment platforms and pension providers will need to offer so-called retirement pathways, much like the default investment options offered by working place pensions for working age people. There will be investment solutions based on 4 standardized objectives, which I'll show on my next slide. Annuities will be available, but the options will be much wider than that. The mention of cash there not being a default option is because people who don't take advice quite often like to cash in their defined contribution plans in full, although that might involve paying a lot of income tax and putting all the money on deposit, as that somehow feels safer. What that does do is mean that they're totally exposed to the ravages of future inflation. Not a good plan. I personally feel that retirement pathways are likely to provide a better outcome for non-advised pension investors. So, retirement pathway solutions. There are 4 options, and the scheme member is going to be asked by the provider to say which of these 4 statements is most appropriate to them. Firstly, I have no plans to touch my money in the next 5 years. Secondly, I plan to set up a guaranteed income by annuity within the next 5 years. Thirdly, I plan to start taking a long-term income within the next 5 years. 4, I plan to take my money out within the next 5 years. And members of schemes will start to receive wake-up packs from age 50 and every 5 years after. And whichever option is chosen, the pension provider will have an investment solution that fits. We're starting to see the retirement pathway solutions that some investment providers have already put in place. This is only starting from February 2021. And they are similar to the default investment options in the accumulation phase. There's no right answer to this, just the least wrong, I would suggest. But personally, I do think it's a positive step. Advised clients don't have to follow these pathways, but I'm sure that the advice we provide in future to clients in decumulation will take these into account. In fact, we will be obliged to compare any recommendations we make to the non-advised pathways from an appropriateness and value for money perspective. I think it's really a matter of bespoke v off the peg. Most people are happy to shop at Marks and Spencer's for their suits, but some will always want Savile Row. So you've retired. What now? Our grey-haired couple here look like they're going parachuting. Part of the go-go years, I expect, but that certainly wouldn't be for me. So everyone is different, and everyone's idea of perfect retirement is different. Don't let yourself be bound by expectations, I would say. I just ran through my client list of over 60s to find out what they're up to, and this is just some of the things that they have going on at the moment, and it's not an exhaustive list by any means. There's an ex-chartered accountant who's now doing a history degree. There's an ex-IT specialist who's now creating a board game which he hopes to get to market. There's a solicitor who's now sitting as a judge at age 70 plus. A lot of people are buying campers and caravans. Let's hope they'll be able to go somewhere in them before too long. Some clients are emigrating to Spain despite the vagaries of Brexit. Some of my clients are building a beautiful eco house in Nottingham. A client who'd retired from working as a pharmacist has now gone back to work and is also doing sessions as a COVID vaccinator. Got people fostering dogs for the Dogs Trust. A lot of people looking after grandchildren when they're allowed to. And a lot of people very keen to travel, again, when they're allowed to. And lots more things beside. Everyone's different, and everyone's idea of a perfect retirement is different. I would say again, don't let yourself be bound by expectations. So just for a bit of fun, I thought I'd put a list of famous working over 70s. Mostly in the fields of arts and entertainment here, apart from Queen Elizabeth II. And I'm sure they still very much love what they do. Roger Daltrey of The Who, now aged 76, famously sang the line, "I hope I die before I get old," in the track My Generation, written by fellow band member Pete Townshend in 1965 when he was all of 20 years old. I don't expect either Pete or Roger want to now. One of my favourites here is Dolly Parton, who in recent years has been a major philanthropist. She helped fund development of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine in the US, and her Dollywood Foundation has provided over 100 million books to children all over the world over a number of years. What a star. So, welcome to the rest of your life. This isn't actually a picture of him, but it's meant to represent Foja Singh, the turbaned tornado, currently aged 109, who was still running marathons in 2013 at age 102. He ran as a young man and then took it up seriously again at age 89. As someone who specialises in giving advice to people about retirement, what have I learned over the years, both from observing my clients, who I would say have made a success of their retirement, but also from my family and friends? I personally am in the position where I've got 2 younger retired siblings, but I'm not retired myself. Well-being. It's not selfish to look after yourself. Don't give up on exercise, but do something appropriate to your age and state of health. Read widely and do interesting things. Don't be afraid to relax and unwind when you want to. Life isn't a race, it's more of a ramble. Keep in touch with people, be it family, friends, or casual acquaintances. Lockdown has made people realise that they really miss those little chats with people, be it the man behind the counter at the shop or the woman on the next mat at the yoga class. People need people. You love your children if you have them, but don't look after them financially to the detriment of yourself and your partner. Life is hard for young people nowadays, but it can be hard for old people as well. If you're going to need care later in life, you really, really do want to be in the best care home you can afford. Working, if you choose to, either paid or unpaid, really can keep the mind active, and you tend to get to mix with people much younger than you, which is always interesting. Technology is your friend. Don't be scared of it. And definitely enjoy each day. Don't wait until things get better. They might not, so make the most of how things are now. So, what would I say are the actions to take away here? I would say think seriously about what you want to do with the rest of your life, not just financially. What is your purpose? Plan what you're going to do with your time, be it family, hobbies, travel, social life, volunteering, parachute jumping, whatever you want. Check your state pension entitlement and fill any gaps if necessary. Think about other possible non-pension sources of income. Could be part-time work or a business, for example. Think about where you want to live. Do you want to downsize? Do you possibly want to move abroad? Collect together details of all of your existing pensions. The pension tracing service can help if there's things that you've lost track of, and other investments. And I would definitely recommend speak to an independent financial planner who specialises in holistic planning. So, a few last words. Life is short. Enjoy it. Look at the late Captain Sir Tom here and what he started at age 99. It's not a rehearsal. So get out on that stage and give it your all. A bit about us, Balanced Wealth Planning. We're a chartered financial planning firm. We are holistic financial planning specialists. We're experts in planning for big lifestyle or financial changes. We've got lovely offices in West Bridgford, unfortunately shut at the moment, but we are very friendly and available currently via video calls. And here's some contact details for you. There's a list of the resources I mentioned earlier in the presentation. And if you'd like a copy of the slides, that can be arranged. So now it's time for your questions. And just to show that I practice what I preach, this is a picture of me at my graduation celebrating becoming a Fellow of the Personal Finance Society at age 64. Since that time, I've studied an undergraduate level psychology course and an intensive financial coaching practitioner course, as well as continuing to work as a financial planner. And I'm currently working out what I'd like to do next. Who knows? Thank you very much. So time for questions.